All right, welcome back. Citizens United versus F.E.C. There's a context for this case. You can check that out if you want to. All right, so what happened here exactly? So this is a complicated case, probably the most complicated of all of them that are required for the AP exam this year. So you have some campaign finance laws, specifically BICRA, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Finance Act, which banned corporations and unions from independent political spending within 60 days of a general or 30 days of a primary. So remember, independent spending, we're talking about when you spend money on behalf of a candidate to help or harm his opponent, to help the candidate or harm their opponent, but you don't give the money to the candidate. You run the ad yourself. That's the independent spending. And so this law said corporations and unions were not allowed to do that within that certain time frame. BICRA also banned direct contributions from corporations to candidates or to parties. And so the specific event that spurs this case is that in 2008, a group called Citizens United, which was a conservative, or is a conservative nonprofit, they made a movie called Hillary the Movie, and they are prevented by the F.E.C., that's the Federal Elections Commission. They're the federal agency in charge of actually implementing and enforcing federal campaign finance laws. They were prevented from showing the movie because it fell within that window of being 30 days before a primary. So they sued, and here we are. All right, so the issue the Supreme Court is going to be taking a look at here is, do the Supreme Court's previous rulings and BICRA, or other campaign finance laws, apply to nonprofits, or are those organizations protected by the First Amendment's free speech clause when supporting political issues? So remember, Citizens United, they were a nonprofit. So are they exempted from those restrictions against corporations and unions because of free speech, or does that law apply to them? The holding by the Supreme Court is that corporations are people, therefore corporate funding of independent political expenditures cannot be limited. Notice how broad this holding is. This is actually much broader than what the initial question asked. The question was asking about nonprofits specifically. The Supreme Court here holds, however, not just about nonprofits, but that corporations in general can't be excluded from spending money on politics. And the basis for that is that they decided that corporations are people. People have First Amendment rights. Therefore, that means corporations have First Amendment rights. So they are allowed to engage in an unlimited amount of funding political campaigns. We'll talk about the details slide after next. All right, so the impact from Citizens United has been tremendous on American politics and political campaigns. So I have 4 things here. The first one, corporations, unions, and interest groups can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money in the form of independent expenditures. So recall that independent expenditures, what that refers to, it's talking about that you support candidate X, but instead of writing a check to candidate X so that they can make their own ads and run their campaign, you don't give them the money. You spend it yourself, so independent of the candidate, and you make your own ad of why people should vote for candidate X. That's an independent expenditure. And now, as a result of this case, corporations, unions, and interest groups can do that in unlimited amounts. Citizens United led directly to the formation of independent expenditure-only committees, better known as super PACs. So super PACs are a direct result of Citizens United. They did not exist before, and now they are a very important part of American politics. So by their name, it tells you what they're allowed to do. They are only allowed to engage in independent expenditures. They cannot give any money directly to candidates. Citizens United also struck down certain parts of BICRA, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, including the ban on soft money and limitations on timing of political ads. It also led to a massive increase in the amount of money being contributed to political campaigns. So restarting that debate about the influence of money, and obviously because some people have a lot more money than others, does that give them more influence over politics and elections than other people have? That's kind of the big question that comes out of this ruling. All right, constitutional principle to support the decision, it is based on the First Amendment's free speech clause. And remember, because corporations are now viewed as people, they then have the right to engage in political speech. So this is framed as a free speech case. All right, so some key quotes from the majority opinion written by Chief Justice John G. Roberts. By the way, again, this was a 5-4 ruling, so he's speaking for the majority here. He goes on to say, he describes what Bicker did, making it illegal to make certain ads within a certain time frame. And in yellow and bold, he says that these prohibitions are classic examples of censorship. So again, notice how he's framing this. This is a free speech issue. We are protecting people from censorship. Were the court to uphold these restrictions or allow them, the government could repress speech by silencing certain voices at any of the various points in the speech process. So he says we are defending free speech from an attack by government. All right, he goes on to say that speech is an essential mechanism of democracy. He also kind of anticipates that people are upset because this is talking about corporations. So he's like, hey, if we were saying this about individuals, nobody would believe that these restrictions were okay. They're not okay just because it's corporations. So free speech is essential. Therefore, political speech must prevail against laws that would suppress it. So again, you come back to that idea of free speech being the most fundamental of our rights. And Justice Roberts is saying that they're defending free speech in this ruling. And then just one additional quote. First Amendment protects more than just the individual on a soapbox and the lonely pamphleteer. So again, he's just reminding people that just because he's now defending the speech of the rich and of corporations, he's saying that doesn't matter. Free speech isn't dependent on, being isolated or poor or anything else like that. So Justice Roberts here says that the ruling threatens to undermine the integrity of institutions across the nation. He's talking about elected institutions, governorships, senators, representatives, all these things. He's saying that essentially rich, powerful corporations, unions, they're going to be able to throw such vast sums of money into these electoral campaigns that it will irreparably harm American democracy. That's what this issue is to him. To him, it's not a free speech issue. It's an integrity of elections and the right to vote issue to him. He says also the path the court has taken to reach this outcome will damage this institution. What he's talking about there is the fact that, remember, the initial question was just about nonprofits. But the court didn't just answer to say what nonprofits could do. They expanded their ruling to discuss all corporations, unions, and interest groups. So they made a much, much broader ruling. So what he's saying there is the case itself didn't even provide really the opportunity to make this ruling. That obviously to him, the court just wanted to make this ruling, and so they took a case that was kind of close to it, and they used it as an excuse to gut campaign finance laws. On this slide, you can pause it if you want to look at it in a little bit more detail. He's just giving examples of times the court has allowed certain restrictions on political speech. And then finally, he says that this opinion is going to promote corporate power at the cost of the individual. Again, you see what he's looking at it from that perspective, corporate power at the cost of the individual. It will cripple the ability of ordinary citizens to protect against the corporate domination of the electoral process. So you see very clearly he's looking at this from a standpoint of the power, the relative power that people have depending on the amount of money that they have and corporations have, and that they will have undue influence on elections. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button for me. This has been a La Money production.
God save us all. I pray for y'all. You know the tables turn. I buy a tablecloth. I got it off the ground and now it's straight to Mars. Shout out to the pilots that died taking off.